Some rides are just rides, but some rides stay with you forever. I've been a cyclist in one form or another now for over 50 years. And in that time, I've done certain rides that have just lit something inside me. They've not necessarily been the longest or the hardest rides I've ever done in my life, but I've got to the end of them and they've given me moments where I thought to myself, yes, this is why I ride. Mountains, madness, mates, even moments of mid-ride magic. If you've ever got to the end of a ride on a complete high, you'll know exactly what I mean. So with that said, let me take you through 5 rides that have really stuck with me. Each one has meant something different. Sometimes it was the effort, sometimes it was the company, and sometimes it was just the sheer scale of what this over 50 overweight sack of custard had achieved. Now first up, in no particular order, is the Col de Costouge. And this particular ride is located in the southeast of France near the village of Arles-sur-Tech. And I discovered it in 2019 when my friends Chris and Vicky at the Pyrenees.cc invited me to go and stay with them. Now the first time I ever did this ride was actually with Vicky, and we'd ridden up from the village of Saint-Laurent-de-Cerdin in France, and we climbed up the Col de Costouge and got to the top there, and then we started our descent. And quite frankly, I just wasn't prepared for just how amazing and how stunning the descent was. We were presented with some sweeping bends, and then when we got to the bottom of that, we crossed the border into Spain, and that was only the second time I'd ever done anything like that, so I thought that was pretty cool as well. After we crossed the border, we continued descending on this absolutely stunning descent before we hit a couple of little lumps and bumps and the final 6-kilometre climb, which actually was a little bit on the tough side. We then descended into the village of Saint-Laurent-de-Muga, where we had an absolutely fantastic meal at a wonderful steakhouse. Since doing that ride for the first time back in 2019, I've done it a couple of other times now, and it's never failed to be as majestic and as stunning. I've done it in the high summer when it's been absolutely baking, in clear blue skies, and it's just been absolutely incredible. For me, the magic of that ride is because I just wasn't expecting something quite so stunning. As we were climbing up on the French side, the route was fairly wooded and enclosed, but then we got to the village of Costouge at the top, and then once we went over, it just opened up and the view was absolutely stunning. Next up is the Cape Town Cycle Tour, and obviously this takes place in Cape Town in South Africa, and I think it's billed as something like the world's largest cycle race or the world's largest cycling event, and it takes place every March. I first heard about this ride back in, I think, 2009 or 2010. I was chatting to a South African friend of mine and she told me all about it, and right there and then I thought to myself, yes, this has to be one of my absolute bucket list rides. But then in 2024 I was fortunate enough to be able to ride it. The ride itself is 110 kilometers and it basically goes around the Western Cape on completely closed roads, and I have to say I was absolutely blown away by the route. Once we left Cape Town, we immediately started seeing mountains in the distance and just incredible ocean bays. We rode through a variety of different scenery, ranging from quiet little provincial towns to almost desert-like conditions to stunning cliffs with amazing ocean vistas. Along the route there were supporters cheering us along, and it was just The atmosphere was just incredible. It actually gave me goosebumps as we were riding through some of these little towns. But for me, the absolute highlight had to be the iconic Chapman's Drive, which is a 7-kilometre climb up to an amazing viewpoint. And then once you get to the top there, you go through the cliffs, and it's just a massive descent, basically back into Cape Town, where the crowds were just absolutely extraordinary. For me, the thing that made it really special was that I'd just been building up to do that ride for 10-15 years previously, and it was just something that I thought that I would perhaps never get to achieve, yet there I was crossing the finish line on the Cape Town cycle tour. Next up is another ride in South Africa, and it was one that I did a few days before I did the Cape Town cycle tour. And this one is the Bainescliff Pass, which starts in the village of Wellington. And again, I just wasn't prepared for what was about to come. The climb itself is 14 kilometers from the town of Wellington, and the road itself was just absolutely butter smooth. And as you're riding up, you just see all these sweeping vistas of wooded countrysides and valleys. It just looks absolutely incredible. And then you get to the top and start descending down the other side, and it is just completely different. It's very rocky and barren, and yeah, they'd had a forest fire as well there. So as I was descending, I could smell all the smoke and the fire, and that just added to all of the atmosphere. When we got to the bottom, we stopped for some refreshments, and then there was some debate about whether I was going to cycle back up to the top again and then down the other side. And after a word or two with Ingo, who was running the tour, and a chap called Bram, who was basically looking after me, I decided to actually make that return trip. And I'm jolly glad I did, because it was just, again, absolutely stunning. It was completely different going in the opposite direction. And again, I just pushed myself, got to the top, descended over the other side, and the sense of achievement when I got back to the village of Wellington was just absolutely extraordinary. I'd done 30 kilometers of climbing, and again, I just thought that was something that was way beyond me, yet there I was finishing it and actually feeling good about it. Next up is the Niagara River Parkway in Canada, and this was a ride that I did in July 2024. I was over in Canada visiting family when I was lucky enough to be invited on a ride by a chap called Rick, who very kindly also managed to organise a bike for me. I met Rick in a place called Fort Erie on the shores of Lake Erie, and we proceeded to ride along the length of the Niagara River Parkway. Again, this is a ride where I didn't really know what to expect, and that's just because I just didn't know the area. Luckily for me though, Rick was local, so he obviously knew all of the good places to ride. Now, there weren't any significant climbs or anything like that on the route, but we were passing through some very picturesque little kind of colonial style villages, and obviously we're also following the Niagara River, which eventually led us to the spectacular Niagara Falls. Now, unfortunately for me, I had visited the falls the day before, but even so, just riding through them was absolutely spectacular and something really, really special. Once we'd passed through the Niagara Falls area, we continued following the Niagara River. So we went down the escarpment and then through the wine region of Canada. I mean, I had no idea that Canada had produced wine, so you learn something new every day. And then we finished our ride in the very picturesque little town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. All told, it was a 70-kilometre ride, and it was absolutely fantastic. So again, a massive thank you to Rick for actually organising that and inviting me. And finally, well, no prizes for guessing, it has to be the legend that is Sacalobra, which is located on the Spanish island of Majorca in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I doubt there's a cyclist alive today that hasn't heard of Sacalobra. And for me personally, I first heard about it back in 2003, and I got to the top of the cliff and I looked over the edge and I saw the road snaking away underneath me, and my friends were saying to me, well, we're going to ride down and ride back up again. That's the only thing you can do. And I was just immediately intimidated by it. Consequently, every single time I went back to Mallorca, I promised myself that I would ride it, and I did exactly the same thing. Got to the top, felt intimidated, and then didn't ride it. That was, of course, until 2022, when I rode it with a group of my cycling friends. So we rode to the bottom of the climb there, and then we turned around and cycled straight back up again. It's 9 kilometers and it climbs about 700 meters, so it's quite a tough climb, and I had to stop for a couple of breathers along the way, but when I got to the top I just felt absolutely fantastic. I'd conquered something that had intimidated me for the previous 20 years, and something that I thought that I would never ever achieve. Every one of those rides tested me in a very different way, and that's precisely what I love about cycling. It can show you what you're capable of, it can teach you that you're stronger than you think, and how all of that can filter down to life off the bike. The other fantastic thing about these rides is that the next great one is only just around the corner. And if you'd like some support organising yours, whether that's fitness, mindset, or just staying consistent, please consider joining my mentorship group. I'll leave a link in the description below. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.